In today's show, we're going to use Power Apps and Power Automate to create a SharePoint list. So we're going to create the SharePoint list and we're going to create all the columns to go with it. Should be fun. But first, here's our intro. Hi, my name is Shane Young with Power Apps 911. Those guys. And today, we're going to create a SharePoint list. But not using the SharePoint browser, which would completely make sense. But instead, we're going to use Power Apps to give us all the information. So choose our field names, our field types, whether or not they're required. And then we're going to package up that information and we're going to send it over to Power Automate, who's going to use the SharePoint Rest API to create the list and then create the column, set any values we need, and then put it into the default view. So lots of little moving parts. Now, the first question you might be asking yourself is why? That's a fair question, and I didn't have an answer for it the first time. But the idea here for me is there's really two answers. One is I need you guys to understand how all these pieces work. So we're going to go cover Parse JSON, the SharePoint HTTP action to create a list, create a column type. We're going to do a switch in there. We're going to get to write some more complex stuff. So this video will be a little nerdy, but that's okay. You can do it. And then secondly, the reason I want to do this is we find that people have different requirements, right? So maybe you want to have someone fill out all of this to enter all the things about creating a list, and then you want to send that request over for approval. And only if it gets approved, then automatically create the list. Or maybe you want to let them create a list this way, but you automatically want to include 4 columns. And so you want to have those pre-created columns go with this process. I don't know. You guys find lots of interesting ways to use this stuff. So I just want to work through the mechanics. So anyway, we're going to switch over to my desktop and take a look at this. Over here on the desktop, you can see that I have the SharePoint List-O-Matic. I don't know because I'm a dork. And so let's give it a list name. So we're going to say a list. Very, very clever. And so this code for OnStart, this is just the code that would actually go on OnStart, but I want to show it to you, so that's why it's pulled out. So anyway, what do we want here? Well, we want a name field, right? So we're just going to, I don't know, call it name. Easy enough. We'll set it to required, and then we'll set the type of column to be text. Awesome. We'll say add. So over here on the right, I have a gallery that is kind of showing us all of the pieces of the puzzle so we can see the fields that we're creating. It's a text column, it's name, and this is the actual JSON that we're going to have to send over to Power Automate to create this the way we want it. So it gives you kind of a hint of how this all works. If we do a more complex one like favorite color, we'll say required yes. And then we'll go here to choice. When we do this, we get choice to add. And so I can be like red, and then we'll hit the plus, and then we'll say blue, we'll hit the plus, and then we'll say green. Just like so. So then that will add all those. And if we press the add button down here, you'll see that that gets different JSON, right? So not only does it have the values, like the one above, but it also has the choices here with results, and then red, blue, green in an array, right? That's the square brackets around it. And then just for one more, we'll just do age. It is not required. And then we'll set that to be a number field. So there you go. So we have a list named a list. We have 3 different columns over here. And now we're going to say create list flow. All right. So that all went away. And if we go back over here to SharePoint and then we do a refresh of the screen, we see a list. I named it a list so that way I don't have to scroll and go find it. There's always a method to my madness. And if we click on that, look at that. There is our thing. Title, name, favorite color, age. If we do new, we will see that that is text. There's our choices with red misspelled or with a capital E because I typed too fast. Age, and then, all of the different things we'd expect. So there you go. That's what we're going to learn how to build here in the next few minutes. Probably take more than a few minutes, but you get the idea. So how does that work? Well, let's start on the let's go to the flow side. Let's understand kind of how the flow works. And then we'll go to the Power App to see how Power Apps gets flow what it wants. And so the key component here is going to be this send an HTTP request to SharePoint. So we're going to figure out the site address that we want. So this is where I want to create my site's PA. You could make this dynamic content if you wanted to let the users pass that over. You could pass that in, but we're not doing that. The method is going to be a post. So all that says is I want to send information. I want to post information to that SharePoint API. The headers, there's an accept and a content type with this application, blah, blah, blah. It's just always there. So don't overthink it, but those two need to be there. And so then down here, the body, this is what we were really after. And so this is a double underscore in case you're wondering. Double underscore metadata type SP list, allow content types is true, base template's 100, the description, I wrote myself. And then title, we just asked in Power Apps. So Power Apps is just going to send us the text that we want to go in for the list title. And that right there, that's all it takes to create a SharePoint list from Power Automate using the REST API. Now, also, as you're looking at all this, you're like, Shane, that's a lot for me to write down and copy. Remember, you can go download this working app and working flow from the curated library. If you just go out to training.powerapps911.com, that will let you, sign up for the curated library, the YouTube library, I think is what we call it now. Anyway, you do that, you can download this app and all the other perks. So anyway, so that's be the answer if you were like, that's too much to type. Okay, so this is our first one, right? So send all this. Yay! That creates us a list. Now, someone asked when I was showing this off earlier, that could you create a library? Yep, so the base template type is just different for a library. So you go look that up. You go type in like in Bing or Google, SharePoint Rest API base template library. And you'd find the list of all the base template types and you'd find out the code for changing this. And so this setting the different number here and the different metadata type here would change it from a list to a library. So you could absolutely use this to create a document library with the same steps. Actually, speaking of that, hang on, I'll just tell you what the number is. One sec. So here, this is one of my other flows. I just opened it to make you wait on me to find it all, but I keep this one with all my details. And so this one shows you that the base template for a document library is 101. So everything's exactly the same except base template 101 makes a document library. So there you go. Bonus tip I didn't plan to share. Okay, so that creates our SharePoint list. Then what we're going to do is we are going to ask for Power Apps to send us the data of all the columns it wants to send. And so what we're going to do over in Power Apps is we're going to create a collection. And we're going to use the JSON function like we've done in the past to turn that collection into a JSON array that we'll send to Flow. When Flow gets that, we're going to have to parse that JSON. So that's where we're going to do this. And so the reason we're going to do it here is we want to parse JSON to find out what are all the columns in there. And so once you've created your JSON, that's the reason you see this little compose step up here. My first flow, let's just go right here. I'll show you a little trick I do. So if I wanted to just run this flow and just see what goes here, I just do a little terminate and just say, hey, you succeeded. And then we'll just do a test real quick, automatically, boom, boom, boom. So rerun the data. Okay, so then after a second, this comes back. And you can see that because the terminate will just stop right here. That's the reason I put that in there. If not, this would have failed because the list already exists. But if we go up here to compose now, you see this outputs? This is what was actually sent over from SharePoint. So you can do a Control A, Control C. And don't worry, we're going to talk about, or send over from SharePoint, send over from Power Apps. And we're going to talk about how that gets generated, right? We just haven't gotten there yet. But that stuff coming over, we copy that. Now we go back in here, we can edit our flow. We'll get rid of this terminate. We don't need that. And we go back to Parse JSON. You say generate from sample, and you paste that stuff in and say done. And you can see that then Power Automate automatically figures out for us how that stuff is formatted. And then that's how it knows that I have a column called column type, I have a column called title, and I have a column called body, and all three are required. Technically, we could pull that out, but we're going to leave that be. But so that parsing the JSON is what we're going to do to get the structure, because now that we've got that structure, then we're going to say, all right, so that JSON, that's an array, which means table. We're going to loop through that. So we're going to apply to each. So for every column that's in there, so we had 3, right? What did we do? We said, send an HTTP request to SharePoint, same site, same post, different URI this time though, right? So get by title, and then the list title that we just created and fields. Remember up here, it was API web list. So posting to this created a list, posting to this says, hey, go get that specific list that we just created and grab its fields and post to the fields, which means add a field. And then the body portion, that is the JSON that we saw over here, right? That's all of, so we just do a new one here, test, and do a text add, right? So the JSON is going to be this stuff. So metadata, blah, 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 FieldTypeKind 2, required false, title test. So that's what gets plugged into here. That creates the field. And then down here at the bottom, we're going to then hit this weird API list, get by title, send, so that same list, but we get the views, and then we get the all items view, and then we get the view fields, and then we add view field. That one's a little more complicated, but notice there is no body here. You just have to tell it what field from the list to add to the view, and it goes. So the flow is not terribly complicated, right? There's not a lot of hard moving pieces here. The key is that we're going to use Power Apps to dynamically generate the body for all of those field types. So, and then this one's pretty static. Okay, so that's how our flow works. So let's go back over to Power App. So over here in the Power App, I needed to do a few things, right? Really the hardest part of this, I think, or at least the part I had to think about the most, was over here for setting the type of column. So if they choose a choice, the options are different. If they choose these four, actually, believe it or not, they're very similar. So really choice is the only outlier here. So to populate this dropdown, I put that data into a collection. And I put that collection on, I'm going to put that collection on app OnStart. So that way, every time the app loads, this collection gets generated. So I called it collection field types. The title, this is what's going to show up in the dropdown. And then the JSON, so this is the first half of the code, if you will, or the JSON that is needed to create this field, right? So metadata type field text, FieldTypeKind 2. Now we're missing two things on there, right? There should also be a required, true or false, and then there should be the field's actual title as well, right? So what I'm doing is I have this first collection that is just the first half. And so you can see that for text, it's field type 2, numbers are 9s, dates are 4s, multi-line are 3, choice is 6. And notice that the type here, field date time for date is different, and choice is SP field choice. So that's half the metadata that needs generated. The other half that generated, so if we type in, let's go right here. So we'll just say my field, required yes, and then type a column text. So when we press the add button down here at the bottom, this is where we're going to make the rest of the formula. So we're going to say add, and we're going to say, all right, collect. So add a record to collection fields, set the field my body. I just made up a name, right? And I said, all right, take the date, drop down type of column selected JSON. So that's the JSON half that we just created. And if we select this right now, you would see that, right? So that is pulling in curly bracket, or single quote, double underscore metadata, blah, 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 all the way to field type 2, comma. That's where it ends. Take that and then ampersand, append to this required, and then the toggles value. So is it true or false? So put in that. And then set the title to the input field name text. And so that is how, if we press this button right now, that's what the my body would be. Now there's an and if here. We're going to talk about the if in a second, so ignore the if portion. But so that gets the one for the text. Then we set a second column. We set it to title because I need the title to add it to the view later. So I just made a redundant column called title. I didn't have to make it redundant, but I thought that made more sense. And then column type is selected title as well because I wanted to show that in the gallery. So if we press add now, let's press add. We'll see over here, my field, curly bracket, metadata type SP field, field type 2. Remember, so this is what came from choosing here. And then we appended to it required was true because true was selected, and title was my field because that's what we had in here. And then we put our closing curly bracket. So this, oh, I did not mean to grab my mouse. Control Z. This, let's just do this. This chunk, right? So everything I have highlighted blue is what gets populated into right here. It's the my body portion, and that's what SharePoint needs to create it. So that's how you create a SharePoint list column of that type. And so because we're dynamically building this out, right? If we do the same thing, but we do my date, not required, type a column as date and add it. Scroll down here. So look, metadata type SP field date time. Remember, because that came from the code in here. FieldTypeKind 4 came from the code here. And then we appended required. And because this was not selected, then we set it to false. And then title was my date because that's what we had in the field name. So that's how that works, right? It's the same thing for date, multi-line text, number, and text. All four of those work exactly the same. because they're pretty simple. They got the 2 part, and then they got the two static part for their type, and then the 2 dynamic part. Okay, so that makes those forms. Now, last but not least, we had the choice column. So if we do choice, let me set my choice here. So then here, when I choose choice, all of these things, so this label, this input, this list control, this plus, and this X, all of these are, they're visible as set to only true if this choice is set here, right? So like if we click on this, we'll just look real quick. Okay, what is your visible? Oh, I didn't click in there. There we go. What is your visible? Drop down type selected title equals choice. So that's how those all show up. So then how does this work? Well, so when we put in a value here, so remember we did red, so let's just do orange. When we press this plus, it gets added down here. So how does that work? The idea here is that we say, hey, if var choices is not blank, set var choices to var choices and a comma. So this is how I'm going to add on additional ones. So right now it's blank, so this didn't get ran. So then I said set var choices, so it's a variable, to whatever's in var choices and a single quote and whatever they typed into here, so in that case orange, and then a single quote. So that's why when I press the button, it set the variable to var choices, and then you see single quote orange, comma down, or single quote down here. So then now if I go to add purple, when I say purple, purple shows up as the second line because what happened here? Var choices is not blank, right? So because orange is already in there, so it's not blank. So it took oranges and then added a comma, right? Because we want to separate these things by comma, so it adds a comma. And then it says, all right, so take oranges, comma, and then add single quote, purple, single quote. And so then that's how, if we look at the string var choices right now, it is orange, comma, purple. And clearly if we add teal now, I don't know where I'm coming up with these colors, now it is orange, purple, teal. So var choices is now orange, purple, teal. Okay, so we're just making a variable string that has those 3 values we need in them. Now I wanted to show them to the user down here in a nonsensical way. So I thought I'd have a little fun. So if we look, I used a list box, which I have never used in my entire life. I just saw as being different. I used a list box. But if we look at items, what we're doing is we're using the split function. Split function takes a string of text and splits it into a table, or turns it into a table of text based on the delimiter, which is a comma. So that's why you see orange, purple, and teal as separate lines, because it did that. It turned them into that. I didn't need to do this. I just thought it was a fun little visual thing. And then this right here, if I hit the X, this just deletes var choices. It wipes it all out. So that way I'd have to add it again. Okay. So now if we go to press add, what's going to happen? Now we're going to see that we do all the same stuff, right? We take the selected JSON of choice. So, right, the SP field choice and whatever its number is. I forget what it's, I don't remember its number, but it's number. And then we append the required and we append the title. So just the same as we did with all the other field types. And then here, if drop-down type column selected title equals choice. So if it was a choice they chose, then we're going to add, right? So remember here, you got to back up, ampersand. So append to that choices, and then curly bracket, single quote results, colon, square bracket, and then var choices, which is, you know, orange in single quotes, comma, purple in single quotes, comma, teal in single quotes, and then close that out with a square bracket and a curly bracket, and then of course the final curly bracket that we've been using the whole time. So if we press this add now, if we look at choices, we see metadata field choice, field type kind 6. I knew it was 6. I should have said that. Darn it. Required was false. Title was my choice. And then we added the comma, choices, colon, results, right? And this syntax has to be exact, right? When we build this string, it has to be perfect, because when we send it to the REST API, it has to be perfect. That sends orange, purple, teal over there. Great. So now we have a my choice, a my date, a my field. I don't know what this test is. Let's just delete test. Bye-bye. Okay, so I've got my field, my date, my choice. And so it looks good. So now we need to go up here and give it a list name, a try to. And so now when we go to run this, what are we going to do? We're going to run our flow. But before we run our flow, we have to do one thing. Well, yeah, one thing. we needed to take the collection. Remember, cold fields is your collection, right? That's all those column types, title, my body, all the stuff we're showing in the gallery right now. Take that collection, and we're going to use the JSON function against that. And so we're going to say set ident4, or use the ident4 type. So that way, that way it spreads it all out the way that flow expects. So that gets the data ready. And then we're going to say, all right, run the flow, create SharePoint list. We're going to send it the name from the top, right, which is currently a try2. And then the fancy var JSON that we're about to make, right? We haven't pressed the button, so the var JSON is the old var JSON. But notice the var JSON, or here, we'll press the button and then we'll see what the var JSON looks like. So we'll say play. Okay, so we'll say create the list flow. That ran. You notice also down here, there was all the code to like reset everything back to default. But let's take var JSON, and just to make our lives easier, let's throw a new screen on here. Let's insert a label. And then what does var JSON look like? So that is what we actually sent to flow. So you can see the my field, the my date, the my choice, and all the metadata. That all got sent to flow. If we go back to flow, we go here, say OK. We can see that it was took 41 milliseconds. That's pretty impressive, and it ran. So let's click on it. And so now we should be able to walk through all the process. So the Power Apps trigger says, hey, I got a bunch of data, yay me. You could look at the raw output if you really want to see. We're not going to do that. We don't care. And then we had the compose. Technically, you could delete this compose step. I left it in here to make it easier for us to visualize seeing the data coming from Power Apps, which we just showed on the other screen as well. So it's the same exact stuff we saw over there, but you could delete this from the flow. Oh, I left the terminate in here. I'm an idiot. All right, what are we going to do? We're going to say edit. We're going to delete this step. Thank you. Go away, terminate. Now we'll save. Now remember, we don't have to go to Power Apps and hit submit again. What can we do? We can reprocess our data if it ever finishes saving. Oh, so slow. We'll say test, and we'll just do automatic, recent, and we'll take that last trigger so that way we get our list again. So we'll do a test again. This is what happens when you do live demos, so you can see it running. So this created our SharePoint list, try2. There's the name down here. Remember, when you got created, it returned all the things. So if you wanted to grab the URL that it created or any of that, all that data is returned here. We don't need any of that, but it's all there. Then what did we do? We parsed the JSON. So that's where we took all that craziness that we had over there. Remember, there's the data we saw. We used this schema that we set by using had generate from sample. And then it's saying, hey, here's the output. Here's how it broke it down. So there's a column called column type, a column called title, and a column called my body. And there's 3 of those, right? 1 for each of our columns. So that is an array or table. Let's get rid of that. It's bothering me. And so finally, what do? We applied to each. And so for every one of those 3 records, remember there's 3 columns, so we have to do this 3 times. We first created the field called my field. Okay. And so this is showing you the exact JSON that it sent. So if you're having a hard time visualizing, there's exactly what got sent. Here's what came back. We don't care what came back. And then after that went, we then said, all right, and then run this crazy thing, list get by title, a try2, views get by title, all items, and then add views field, my field. So we did that 3 times, right? So once for the first field, once for the second field, once for the third field. You probably understood that. And if we go back over here now, we should be able to do a refresh. And as you know, a try2 is right here. And there's our fields. Yay! I didn't like the applause. I liked my own yays. So there you go. So that is how it works. Now, from here, think about the ways you could expand upon this, right? So the idea, once again, was just to get the wheels working. But maybe you want to come in here and add an approval step. So after the Power Apps trigger, you send an approval to make sure that it gets approved. Or maybe you want to hard code 4 columns in here yourself. Or maybe you want to go pull data from somewhere else. Maybe you want to copy a list. That's actually what sent me down this path earlier. So there's a lot that you can do now. You start to understand the pieces. There's also, I didn't hit all the column types. I get that, right? But, so there's person column types and multi-choice, multi-select, multi-choice. Right? There's 40 or 50, I don't know, there's probably 40 column types in SharePoint. So you would just have to go find the SharePoint REST API documentation and be like, hey, how do I create a whatever it is I might be looking for. So for example, maybe what I would do here is I'd say, all right, I want to find the different ones. I would be like, all right, I'd copy this FieldTypeKind. That seems pretty unique. And I'd go out here and be like, all right, SharePoint Rest API, create list column, and then how about FieldTypeKind? I would do that. And I always like to start with the Microsoft stuff if I can find it. Maybe FieldTypeKind messed that up. Let's try that. List columns without it. And so anyway, I would start flipping through some of these blogs. Here we go, working with list and list types in REST. So then you'd get some Microsoft explanations here. They're showing you some different stuff. And I believe in here, so then these are the different items. I don't want any of that. But you get the idea, right? Microsoft then has a bunch of documentation. You don't necessarily have to understand all of it. I just kind of copy and paste the pieces as it makes sense to me. So they have a lot of documentation. It is a little developer-y, but at the end of the day, what I'm looking for is, all right, what is this URL I need to hit, right? Like, so here's how you would get all the pieces. So if I wanted to get all the, or pull back the list, right? If I knew the title, so that would give me the whole list back, and that would give me the schema of the list. And then I can kind of build from there. So all the pieces are here. You just have to start working your way through them. I couldn't begin to teach all of them. But if you do have specific questions, leave them below. I love the ideas for future videos. This is the stuff that you're like, hey, I don't need to do this yet. But as you do more with Power Apps and Power Automate, you're going to have to do more with this. Okay, so that's everything I have for today. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Hopefully you're not too mind melted over it. Remember, you can go to training.powerapps911.com and download, or subscribe and then download out there if you want to just get the working list and all this. And yeah, I don't know. I guess with that, I'm going to say thanks and have a great day. Hey, me again. Before you go, click on the subscribe button, right? Join the list of 100,000 plus people that have subscribed already. Or if you need any help, right, check us out at Power Apps 911. We do big projects, little projects, we do training, we do everything, and we can help you. Or if you want to see more videos, you probably do, then just click on the playlist above. Cool? Thanks, and have a great day.